Hey there, bestie. I'm Lori Me, your What to Read Next podcast host. Join me as we dive into exciting new reads that'll have you reaching for your TBR pile in no time. From urban mysteries to spicy romances, we'll explore it all and help you find your next favorite book. So grab a cup of tea, cozy it up, and let's discover some amazing reads together. Hi, Tasha. Welcome to What to Read Next podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So happy to have you here. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I currently live in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is where I grew up. I just moved back here after spending 11 years in Alabama, where I got my MFA in creative writing. And I meant to only stay there while I was getting my MFA. And then I ended up meeting my husband there and getting a PhD also. Yeah. And so then I last year dragged him to Minnesota with me.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so what is your PhD? Like what was your thesis? What's your the other written work that's published? I know.
Yeah. So my PhD is really different from my creative work. So my novel that's coming out, Love Letters to a Serial Killer, I was actually working on it while I was doing my PhD. So my PhD is in composition and rhetoric. And a lot of people aren't super familiar with that field, but how I describe it is it's like reading and writing outside of like books. So like anywhere that you see any sort of like text or even like speaking or images, that's sort of the stuff that we study in composition and rhetoric. So my dissertation was focused on the rhetoric of progressive women in Alabama. So I did a bunch of interviews with women there who were involved in politics and talked about different ways that they used rhetoric in a space where they aren't really seen or heard even within their own like political realm. So that's so different from my book. So I feel like I am a person like I've been told before that in text I can come off as like very serious and academic. And then like you meet me in person and I make lots of jokes and I like to wear a big bun in my hair and I like sparkly things.
Yeah. I love this. Honestly, I love the fact that you were writing this book while undergoing through a rigorous academic pursuit. And academic writing is very different from like writing fiction, especially like the fiction that you wrote. Like it's just like it's such a breath of fresh air. So I'm assuming that was a good escape to go to while actually, writing like this other big book that it goes through rigorous, like, review. And same both go to rigorous review, but they're very different paths.
Y- Yeah, and I think that academic writing really helped me appreciate creative writing. Like, I know a lot of writers who complain about having to write. And I think I used to do this when I was much younger. I was like, oh, it's time to write. Well, let me go wash the dishes or let me go do something else. Like, I don't want to write, even though it's supposedly the thing that I love to do and I want to do. And then when I started my PhD, and probably before then too, I was like, creative writing is like the most fun thing I could actually be doing. And it became something that I really actively wanted to do all the time rather than something that I had to force myself to do because I was like getting a degree in it or whatever. So it
Yeah.
became it was like, it's like eating candy instead of a meal where you're like, oh, I just want to eat this candy all the time.
Yes, and I love the fact that your book, I love Letters to Serial Killer, marries the idea that we have the female fascination with true crime. Like it's just everywhere, and like the fascination, like it's just like it's part of a hobby. Like I personally, sometimes I can't. I have PTSD, so I know I every so often I can fall asleep to Dateline. But like that whole idea, of, like sometimes you just need a murder, like a whole like dig into the story and then get attached to it. So I want to know, like, what is your experience with true crime in your own life, or like, what led you to like fascinated to go down that rabbit hole as an escape?
Yeah. So I would not describe myself as a hardcore true crime person. Like
Yeah,
I know, but there are people who watch all the documentaries and
yeah,
listen to all the podcasts.
Yeah.
And that is not who I am. I sort of like the more old school stuff. So
Yeah.
I really like, is it Anne Rule? Is that her name? She wrote she worked with Ted Bundy in like the
Yeah.
suicide call center. And so she wrote a bunch of true crime books. And I really like those sort of like original true crime texts where they're figuring out what true crime is. I also
Yeah.
really liked Fatal Vision, which is a really popular true crime book that led to a bunch of other books that were sort of contesting the story that it told because
Yeah.
it like presented itself as like this is a factual account, and other people were like, "Wait, like how factual can anything be?" And then I like loved Helter Skelter, and I actually have a friend that I worked with who corresponded through letters with one of the Manson girls. And he was like, "Oh, yeah, the whole premise about Helter Skelter is like totally fake. Like, they didn't think there was going to be a race war. Like, that was just to like get the attention off the other murders that they did," which I thought was so funny. So I read those texts, and part of the reason why I read them is because like in the book, like things are really difficult in my life and in the world. Like I was working full time, doing a PhD, dealing with infertility. There was a lot of stuff going on in the country or like the state that I lived in that was really stressful. And so I was like, okay, I just need to check out by reading these books about horrendous things that happened to other people. And I knew that that was sort of like maybe wrong or like not totally morally justified, but it was truly like a really relaxing thing. Like I had this image, I had a really nice porch in my house in Alabama, and I would like sit in the porch in like sweltering heat reading these true crime books.
I love this. Yeah, I don't worry. Like, I think we all have like our own go-to escape. Like for me, it was like spicy romances for a while. Like, and now it's murder. Like, it really comes down to like I went from like the husband, I can fall in love with the husband, or maybe the husband did it, and kind of deal. And so just because we're in the world right now, it's chaos, it's a mess, and it's just like I need something to escape from. And it's just, there's nothing to be guilty about. It's just, this is what we need, you know? So, all right, let's talk about love letters to a serial killer. What is the elevator pitch? What can readers expect from this book?
So I would think the elevator pitch is easily contained within the title. So it's about a woman who like, starts writing letters to a serial killer and then she falls in love with him. But to add to that, I really think it's a like very millennial story. So the protagonist is in a job where she's underpaid and underappreciated, and she really wants to do good in the world. And all of those attempts sort of fail. And so, she might as well just like fall in love with a serial killer.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Like, I was like, it's a very like I can identify for a long time as a temp, and like her stories of a work situation was just like, yep, I can identify with that. You know? Like it's like trying to find your way in the world, but you're underpaid, you're overworked, and you're just and at the same time you're like you find solace in communities like Reddit communities and communities like rabbit holes and stuff. Like I found solace in like my Bravo gossiping community. Like it's just like talking about Bravo. It's like it's a really great thing that brings it together. And I can identify with her life and then be like, okay, well, you might as well just send letters to a serial killer. He's cute. You might as well.
Yeah, I've heard from a lot of people that her sort of work situation resonates. So she
Yeah.
worked at a nonprofit, and I've actually never worked at a nonprofit, but I have had a lot of friends that have worked in nonprofits, and my husband actually got a job at a nonprofit after I already knew this book was gonna be published, and I, like, apologized to his boss, and I was like, "I'm so sorry, like, I'm not talking about you," and she was like, "No, it's fine. I love to make fun of nonprofits." But I worked in academia for over a decade, and it was very similar, and that's what I think is interesting. It's like, it doesn't really matter the field that you're in. There's no field where people are immune to this. Like, I think like, I graduated directly into the recession, and so, like, everyone I know really struggled to get their footing. Once they got jobs, like, no one's being compensated appropriately, so we're sort of, like, missing out on these markers of adulthood, and so I think because we don't have these things, we take solace, like you said, in those communities. Like I'm a big Twitter person and Twitter is kind of falling apart right now, which is sad. But I found so much community in that space. Like
Yeah.
I found a really great writing community in that space. So I think that like online communities sort of serve to fill this void in our lives.
Yes, I just tell you, I have a group chat. I have lifelong now, like standing appointments with friends on the internet. Like, not in, and I live in Florida, and I have two Florida friends, so we meet every morning, and we find solace about like the weight of Florida. You're probably familiar, just like Alabama was just a dumpster fire.
Yes.
Similar ideas, and at the same time, we have solace. So like we have each other, and we allow ourselves to pursue those creative pursuits at that moment, just to kind of like, okay, we can be grounded in this phase. But it's a lot of it, that millennial part of it, like, we didn't have the what our parents told us we were supposed to have. We were told you were gonna have this perfect life. We're able to buy a kid, like buy not buy a kid, buy a house, have a kid, like get a dog. Even dogs are expensive. It's like,
I'm gonna be real with you. The only way I got pregnant was through IVF, so I had to buy a kid, and the
yeah,
only way that I was able to have a dog and a kid was I used my, like, COVID stimulus fund. Like,
yes.
the first thing I did with my COVID stimulus money was get a dog, and then the next thing I did with my COVID stimulus money was get IVF. So, like, it was only through, like, getting that extra money that I could get those things that I wanted so badly.
I feel like, I was telling someone, I've been complaining about this too, most of my friends. It was like 2024 and 2020 are very similar. They're very chaotic. The world is a shit and we're just starting to live it. And the only difference that I see is that we don't get government checks. I'm like, where is my government check? It's just for coexisting, just existing.
I
I
know.
don't got money.
I know. I saw a tweet a while ago that was like, the stimulus checks in the spring made me like physically expect that that extra money was going to come to me every
Yes.
year. So you like hit a certain time and you're like, oh, I just need like a little treat. Like if only they could send me like that $1,000 for a little treat.
Yes. I don't know, but I love their fight. And so you gotta pick out Love Letters to Serial Killer. I think it's a great book. And if you're following the Gypsy Rose debacle, her husband,
Oh my God. I can't believe that.
this is a good companion.
I can't believe that she's no longer with her husband.
No.
Like,
Oh, no. Did you see it's a food hoarding? It's like a whole like she found out that he's a food hoarder and it triggered her past childhood trauma and she called him of it. She cleaned up the kitchen or something. I don't know. It's fascinating. It's the whole story is just like it's a really
yeah, that was the story that I definitely got into. Like, I read about it when it, like, first happened, and then the TV show came out, and I watched a documentary about it too.
yeah.
And all these people are like, "Well, why are you obsessed with Gypsy Rose?" And I'm like, "How could we not be obsessed with Gypsy Rose? Like, the story had everything."
It does. It has and now it's a gift that keeps on giving. I'm glad that she's away from social media, but a girl is like, she's like all over the place. I think she's living her best life. Like she was hidden. She was like in a prison for a long time, and now she's like rebelling, and she's like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna do it all." And then it's like, it's drama, drama, drama. I wish her that she would have a quiet, like, peaceful life. I wish that she can just do that. But if she's just living her teenage dreams right now, going from ex-husband to ex-fiance, getting a nose job and getting tattoos and doing all the things, you do you.
Absolutely. And like I think that it sort of goes back to this idea of like likable and unlikable protagonists. Like I think there are all these people who are like, oh, well, Gypsy Rose has this platform now. And so we expect her to be this perfect person. And like, how can she be a perfect person? Like she grew up in an extremely abusive household. Like, why are we asking her to be like a role model all of a sudden when she came from that environment and then went to prison? Like I think the way that she's behaving is actually very relatable.
It is. It is. We're rooting for you. Just like Tara was saying, we're rooting for you, but we're just gonna let you, no judgment,
Yeah.
do you. just if you wanna share it to the world, share it to the world. We're gonna live with it, we're gonna enjoy it, like, we're gonna enjoy the ride. So, alright, so let's talk some book recommendations. What kind of books do you tend to read that could be, like, an escape from all the things? Because 'cause it's been a lot. So
So, how I got into writing thrillers is I was in an MFA program, and in MFA programs, you read a lot of literary fiction. And
Mhm.
I love literary fiction, like, don't get me wrong, but a lot of it is really serious. And when I was like in my early 20s, just wanted to be like a really cool writer. Like, yeah, I was like, yeah, I love this experimental literary fiction about like women who are really sad. And then I had this moment. I remember it was when my husband and I first moved in together and we combined all of our books, and almost all of our books were literary fiction. And I just wanted something to read before bed. And
Mhm.
all I wanted was just like a mystery or a thriller. And I was like, why? We have like hundreds of books, but like they aren't what I want. And after that, I sort of like gave in more to my desires and to read like a lot of thrillers. I also read a lot of young adult literature, and I am a romanticy person. I will fully admit. So, like, everything I read is essentially like a different form of. And then I'm in a book club where once a month we read things that are sometimes more serious. So I do still try to get some literary fiction and like nonfiction, but for the most part, I read thrillers and romantasy, to
And
be real.
there's nothing wrong with that. As someone who reads romance and loves celebrity memoirs and loves, like, the thrillers, the fast-paced thriller, the popcorn thrillers, or just like keep me going. And I don't care about the plot holes. I'm like, just give me the ride. Let me just live my life. I see nothing wrong. Yes, there is a time for a literary fiction. There's a time for issues, things. But my life is miserable. So I would like to have something fun to do with.
Yes. And so, like, I also love books and like movies. So like when I was younger, I ironically loved the Twilight franchise.
Yeah.
And I, like, loved Edward, even though I knew that I shouldn't love Edward. So I sort of love, like, the, like, evil hottie, which is, like, another place where I got the idea for this book, right? Because, like, we love fictional evil hotties, especially if
Yes.
they're magic. And it's totally fine if they've, like, killed a bunch of people, if they're a vampire. And then
Uh-huh.
as soon as you cross the line to, like, "Oh, well, there's a human that's killed a bunch of people," they're like, "Oh, well, no, I can't do that." And so but I think that's so funny, like, where we draw these lines of acceptable attraction.
Yeah.
Like, like the killer Shadow Daddy, oh, that's super hot, but then you have, like, a real life serial killer, and understandably, that should not be attractive. But you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, there's, like, sort of this, like, weird double standard that's.
There really is. Okay, romantasy. We gotta talk about which ones have been your go-to that you're like, I'm loving right now. Are you
I
young adult romantasy? Or are you adult romantasy? Because there's like
I
there's a
don't even
spectrum.
know where I don't even know where the line is anymore. So I
Yeah.
took a young adult literature class when I was in college. I
Yeah.
wrote a paper comparing Twilight and Dracula. And one of the things she said is that young adult literature is read by teenagers and it's read by adults. And that's always stuck with me. And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people get really in a twist trying to figure out, well, like, this is for adults or this is for teens. That I don't know that there's really a line. Like, I sort of think
Yeah.
that it's all the same thing. Like, I saw someone like, get really upset because they were like, well, Fourth Wing isn't young adult. And it was like, it reads so young adult.
You're Richard
Like, it
Mandel. It does. It's
yeah, I
really
mean, it has a young protagonist, like, she's in school. I'm like, I don't know how much more young
she's just
adult you
like
get.
and they age her up to college so she can have sex. Really what it comes down to.
Yeah,
But,
yeah, I
but
mean,
even that is still, like, it's just it's not it's pretty young, like, it's a coming of age story. I think young adults tend to be coming of age, trying to figure out who you are in this world, and there's parental and fourth when there's parental involvement, there's siblings, like, it's a very different than if you're, like, an adult where you're like, parents are care, but they're not, like, the main driver of, like,
yeah,
decision making.
yeah. So I would say, so I guess like I'm definitely a big Court of Swords and Roses person. In the more young adult realm, I loved Holly Black's Spoke of the Air
Yeah,
series. Like I think that does exactly like I feel so silly even like saying fairies, but I think it does
yeah,
exactly what I want a book about fairies to do, where you have this like human who's so jealous of all the beautiful fairies around her. Because that's absolutely how I would feel if I were like the human surrounded by people who could do magic. I'd be like so salty that I couldn't do magic myself.
yes,
But those are probably my 2 favorites, big fairy person.
yeah. Have you read Zodiac Academy?
No, I have
Okay,
not.
it's about a fairy school. It's just addictive. Their books are long. It's like the series is ending this month. The books are long, but it's like it's set. It's kind of like it's set in this world, but at the same time, it's magic. And there's dragons, there's fairies, there's like
Who is the
different
author?
abilities. Carolyn Peckham is San Valenti, I think it is. It's on KU.
Okay.
The books are addictive. Like the first book is kind of like you're trying to get figure out the world, but then they just like progressively get more addictive to each other. You're like, I need to consume all these things, you know? So it's like a mishmash of everything together. Um, and it's
And
just,
I'm always chasing that feeling of like, I just need a new series that I wanna
yes,
consume all of
it is
that.
addictive. Like I would say, like give if you don't like the first one, give it the second one a try. Like they build it upon each other. You get the high. Like they had a troll call at me while I was reading that. I was like, my friends were like, "Did you read something?" I'm like, "No, I'm reading Zodiac Academy." So, all right. So let's chat some book recommendations. Do you have any books to recommend our listeners to pick up?
Yeah. So last week I went to the beach. I was visiting my in-laws. And so one of the things I like to do on vacation is I try to read like around a book a day. So I read Curtis Sittenfield's romantic comedy, which I thought was so good. And I think that it really like balanced the line between like being smart and funny and being like what I want from a
Mhm.
romantic comedy.
Yeah.
And I also read Naomi Alderman's The Future. So I'm obsessed with her book, The Power. Have you read that?
No,
About
it's on my
where like,
list.
yeah, oh, it's amazing. So it's like women all of a sudden get the ability to shoot electricity through their fingertips. Like they just get so angry. And it totally changes the power structure of the world. Like it's sort of refuting this idea that there's like any sort of inherent essentialism within our current hierarchies. And so, like women all of a sudden are in charge because they have this power to shoot electricity through their fingertips. So I'm obsessed with the power. I think about it all the time. The future is similar in that it is like, it has like elements of like science fiction, fantasy, but it's more like tech based. So it's
Okay.
like set in the world, but it's more like dystopian. I say dystopian, but it really is our world. But it's like these billionaires get this technology that tells them when the world is going to end and they should go to their bunkers. And then, of course, they get at the beginning of the book, they get a warning and they're like, okay, the world's about to end. Time to get on the plane to go to your bunker. And then things sort of unfold from there.
Oh my god, that
Yeah.
sounds good. That sounds like
Yeah.
it's a little dystopian, but at the same time, like, it's a dystopian right now because
Right. I think that I don't know that much about billionaires doomsday prepping, but my understanding is they are doing it.
yeah, they are. Yeah, oh my gosh. So Tasha, tell us where you can find you online.
Yeah, I'm very online. So I'm on Twitter. It's at Tasha, 7 A's at the end, or you can just like search Tasha Coryell and find me there. On Instagram, I'm at Tasha Coryell. My website is tashacoryell.com. I recently joined TikTok. Um, I mostly make videos talking about writing, and those get very few views. Sometimes I'll post my dog or like what I made for dinner, and those get so many more views. Like it turns out that people just want to know what I'm eating or what my dog is doing. But that at Tasha Coryell Writer, I'm trying to figure out TikTok.
Hmm.
So the more followers I get, the better, especially like writers or people who like books, because I'm trying to like let the algorithm know who I
Yeah.
am. I'm
Yeah.
like, just send me writers. And the algorithm's like, do you want this video about makeup? And I'm like, no, just give me writers.
Yes. We're gonna work your algorithm to start working for you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you, Tasha, for being on the show.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Watch Read Next podcast. If you enjoy our bookish conversations and want more recommendations, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Also, head on over to the Watch Read Next blog for a list of books mentioned in today's show. Happy reading!